Hello and welcome to the Jessica Pinili podcast, Carly. Thank you so much for coming on.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
I've been very, very excited. I just said to you off recording and for the listeners, I said to Carly as soon as she came onto the Zoom call, I was like, I've been so excited to speak to you because I am loving the things she is posting on Threads and the what she stands for. And I'm very, very excited to get into this podcast episode. And I want to start with a post of yours that I have your Instagram up and I have stalked everyone. I follow everyone that I'm interviewing for the podcast. But this one, I was like, I love it. I think it needs to be spoken about more. So the post is it's a reel and it says on Monday and Thursday mornings I go to Pilates and I normally just drive home straight after. This morning I took a beat to get a coffee and walk to the beach and at the water's edge and just watch. A gentle reminder, you probably have more time to enjoy your life than you think you do. Make the opportunity instead of waiting for it.
Mhm.
What place did this post, it was a thread and you made it into a reel, come from? And why do you think it's important for people to understand this as we get to understand what you do and who you are?
Yeah, I love that question. So the place that this post came from was um it was one of the things that's most important to me in my work is that I am in full embodiment of what I teach and what I expect clients to do. And one of the greatest things that I work with clients on when they're, working with me privately or in a mastermind or whatever is being able to hold the dual focus of being
Mm.
so deeply ambitious and driven to create impact and run this business and scale this business, and it becomes something that becomes so entrenched with our identity and something that we're so proud of, and it feeds that. But it's also so important to remember that a lot of us got into business because of the lifestyle that we wanted to lead, and we wanted to have more freedom. We wanted to have more moments in our life where we were able to just be present and enjoy and not be on anybody else's watch. And all too often I see a lot of people get a few years into their business and they look around and they realize that they have created themselves something that is way more stressful, far more demanding than any job they ever had before. And their identity is so wrapped up with it that they don't feel like they can do anything else because they don't know who they are outside of work. And part of what I do with clients, such a huge part of it is about finding that balance and that harmony and the fulfillment within what you do, but also the fulfillment within your life, and the process of giving yourself permission to live your life is a lot harder than it sounds. It sounds like a beautiful little, Instagram post
Mm.
or sticky note or something. But honestly, like that process of giving yourself permission to do it and then actually feeling safe to have those moments where you step back from being in your business all the time, it's hard work. It takes a lot from you. So that was the place that it really came from. And I love that you chose that post because it is such a good indication of, everything that I stand for within my business.
I agree. And I resonate with it deeply. And I know so many people would as well. And I've definitely been in that place many times in my business where I've created it for a sense of freedom, but you feel more
Mm.
trapped than ever.
Yeah.
Why do you think we move into this trapped feeling? What are we chasing? Why do we get ourselves there when we're really wanting freedom?
I think because a lot of us can resonate with the fact that we left our jobs because we felt trapped. And what we didn't actually realize is that that feeling of being trapped is not just about the environment that we were in. It's also about how we're taught to relate to work. We're taught that work is such a big piece of what we do. Like when you meet someone new, what's the first thing you ask them? You might be introduced to them, by their name, and then you go, so what do you do for a living? Or who, what do you do? Or it's just such a big piece of who we are. And so we leave, or we think it's a big piece of who we are. We leave these jobs and then we go and create these businesses, which for a lot of us, because they're personal brands, they are us. They are every piece of us that we have. And because starting to grow and growing a business, as you know, takes so much from you, from every element of who you are, that we end up creating this thing that we then are so trapped by. And it's not the external environment, it's how we're relating to it that we need to change. So a lot of people, they burn out in their professional careers and they go, well, I have to leave that career.
Mm,
That must be the thing that's the problem. And sometimes it's part of the problem, but often a lot of it is like our ability to see ourselves as someone outside of work and find that identity and have the resilience practices to, not be so burned out by the things that we're doing every day. So we think that it's external to us, but actually when we take that external away and we step into a new environment, we realize that it's still happening. And so it has
mm.
to be an internal process of changing that.
Interesting, because obviously there's a lot of emphasis on change your environment and effectively change who you are and change how you're functioning and your behavior and your programming. But you're kind of not going against that, but saying that we need to look more than just our environment. We
Yeah.
can't just look at, okay, I'm going to move job and expect everything to be okay. And I know that you have a master's in psychology, is that right? When did you study that and how did you get into that to kind of come to the values that you have and you're sharing on this podcast right now?
Yeah, cool. So I started my career in psychology. As soon as I left high school, I went and did my bachelor's in psychology in New Zealand, and then I moved to Australia and started working in a role that was largely like behavioral therapy. And then during that time, I did my master's in behavior analysis, which is like an area of psychology, which is all about like the nitty gritty of how do we actually change people's behavior? How do we understand how it develops and how do we change it?
Mm.
And I was dead on the pathway of becoming a psychologist. Like I was months away from registration. I was months away from practicing as a psychologist. And I finished my master's and I looked around at my life and I was like, hold on a minute, like this is not quite right. There's something that's missing here. Like I'm making an impact, but it's not that impact I want to make. And I'm living my life for somebody else's financial gain. And I was like, wait a minute. Like, am I supposed to spend 40 years working for the freedom to just have that in my old age? Like that's not okay. Like I'm not going down that pathway. And so I finished my master's in 2017. Yeah, early 2017. And a couple of months later, I started training to be a coach. And about a year later, I pivoted into coaching full time and it became my full time gig. But everything that has been in my past, like my professional experience, but also my professional education, it's everything as part of of who I am as a coach. And it's really different and really unusual, which is what I love.
Mm. What is this pivot from psychology to coaching? Because if listeners who maybe aren't in business, aren't in the field or the industry may think, wouldn't you rather be seen as a psychologist rather than a coach?
Mm. Absolutely, there are some people who 100% would. And that's the beautiful thing that's really different, isn't it? Is like, yeah, there are some people for whom being a psychologist and being, in that field is absolutely the right pathway for them. They want to sit in an office, relatively all day, and they want to see one-on-one clients and they want to work in that field. And I'd done that for 6 years and I had realized that I didn't want to do that anymore. And as we know, coaching offers the potential of a lot more freedom than psychology did, except at that point anyway. I mean, there are a lot of therapists now who are obviously, pivoting into running online businesses and courses, but that wasn't the case back then. This was when coaching was very, very new in the field. So yeah, absolutely. Like psychology is 100, I no shade against it at all. Like in fact, I'm about to, start applying for my PhD to do my PhD in psychology. So I love the field. Just being a practicing psychologist was not the pathway for me.
Mm. If someone's listening right now and they're resonating, whatever their chosen career field is, and they're like, I just cannot see myself doing this for another 40 years, 50 years until retirement. And I know that you specialize in behavior psychology. Where do they start to change their behaviors? Where do they start to get out of these cycles and to do something different and not be paralyzed by the thought?
I think it comes down to, first of all, being able to understand, it's coaching 101, right? Is like, you don't want this, but what do you want? Or what are you clear on that you do want? What's the first expression of that? Like 6, 7 years ago, before I started my business, if you'd told me that I would be sitting here, this many years later and having conversations like this and having my business look and feel the way that it does now, I wouldn't have even comprehended that was possible. But all I knew was that my first step was that I had to step out of the job. I knew that I had to get out of that and into working for myself. And whatever that looked like at that point in time, I was like willing to take and willing to work for. So I think the first thing is like, stop focusing on all of the things that are wrong and that you
Mm,
don't want, and like figure out the pieces that you do want. So for me, for example, it was like, it's not that I hate working with people. I love working with people. It's just doing it in that way was not right for me. So it was like, well, how do I use these skills and this knowledge in a way that fits more with my values? And that's a really important conversation, which I think the word values gets thrown around a lot, right? Like people are like,
yeah.
oh, values this and values that, but they're actually incredibly important. And understanding what yours are and understanding that they can change and understanding that usually the ones that we have are the ones that we were taught to have, is being able to figure out, well, which values are actually important to me. Like maybe even just choosing like 2 or 3 of them and asking yourself, well, how can I live these more in the situation that I'm currently in? If that means that you're in a job and you have to continue in that job but change the way that you're experiencing it, then great. That's a great first step. If you're in a business already and you've got these values but you're not living them, then what's the first step to actually living them just a little bit more each day? And I think this process of like slowly unpicking it is really powerful, because then you're slowly learning, actually, I have the power to change this. And I think that's one of the things that people get so disheartened by, is they feel like, I'm so stuck. I've got no options. And that creates and perpetuates that feeling of like, oh my God, I can't do anything with my life. What am I doing? Like, I'm so stuck. And that creates, more turmoil for them. So it's like, what's the first step? What is the first thing that you know that you could change or that you could start to choose, and start going down that pathway and see where it leads you?
What do you think about people who come to this initial, okay, I know I need to change. I don't like my job. Maybe I don't like where I live or the relationships that I currently have in my life. And then a year goes by and another year goes by and another year, and they're still in this cycle. I know personally, I've definitely had friends, I've experienced this myself, where I've complained, hate this, hate that, I want to change this, and it's still kind of this feeling of, I know what I want, I know what I desire, but I'm still stuck in this. Do you think the root is the fear of failure or the fear of judgment? Or do you think there's something deeper behind all of that, where we as humans feel that we definitely don't have a choice to change our entire reality?
I think it's different for different people. There are definitely personal factors, like you just alluded to. Like, yeah, some people have this really big fear of success. And honestly, I see fear of success way more than I see fear of failure.
Mm,
In fact, fear of failure is actually just fear of success presenting differently. So we definitely have those personal factors at play. And you think about, like, we all grow up in different environments and different societies, in different families, and we have different coping factors. And so for a lot of us, and we have had different things modeled to us, different belief systems. A lot of our parents who are baby boomers and stuff, they grew up, with the mindset of like, you kind of just work for a living and you just accept it, and that's kind of just it. And like, you get what you get and you don't complain. And our generation is really different to that.
mm,
But we still grew up with parents like that. So we still had all of those stories being fed to us. So, yes, there's personal factors. Yes, there's like what we learned. And some of us, like, for example, I feel really lucky that I grew up in a house where I was told that I could do anything that I wanted. And I was taught like you could achieve anything, but not everyone has that privilege. A lot of people grow up, sadly, in environments where they weren't taught to trust themselves and weren't taught that they could do anything and weren't taught that they could achieve anything that they put their mind to. So there are personal factors, absolutely. And we all come from different starting places. There's no like, you know, one starting line that we all start from. And then there are different societal factors as well. Like, Perhaps, yeah, we do have this feeling sometimes of like we're just kind of stuck. And like when there's external factors, we can't change anything. And that I think can feel really true when there are lots of really big things going on in the world for sure. And like stuff that we feel like as an individual we can't change. But there's always something that we can do. And it's about deciding if that's worth it for you. And I think that's the point that a lot of us got to, right? We got to the point where we were like, wait a minute, hold on, I can keep being in this space, this environment, this job, this relationship, whatever it is, and I can keep complaining, or I could give it a shot and I could see what comes of that. And that becomes the new journey. So there's lots of factors at play for sure.
I would love for you to speak a little bit more on fear of success
Mm.
because I agree with you. I think it's a lot more prevalent. I see it in when my clients come to me and say, I have a fear of failure. I look at them and I go, it's actually a fear of success. And I think
Mm.
over the years, I've definitely seen it more and more in clients and friends, in myself as well. And I think it's something that, yes, it's very unconscious, but to the point that people don't want to admit that they fear getting exactly what they desire. Why is that?
Oh my God, so many reasons. And I think this is like the cool thing about coaching, right? Is that those reasons are so personal to us, though there are definitely some themes. So maybe would it be helpful if I spoke about some themes?
I would love for you to, please.
I think one of the biggest things is the fear of how we think other people will respond to us
Mm,
if we are successful.
mm,
Because if you think about it from like an evolutionary perspective, our job, our brain's job was to wire ourselves and our behaviors in ways that made us fit in with the pack,
mm,
the people around us, because being in the pack was required for survival. If you got cast out from the pack, you couldn't share those things like hunting and gathering and protection and all of those things, right? So belonging is crucial for our survival. And a lot of us who start to experience some success outside of what we were taught was quote unquote possible for people like us, like people in our family, or, you know, the amount of money that we're allowed to make, or, you know, whatever it is, because of the color of our skin or because of which country we come from. Like we all have these ideas about what is possible for us based on, you know, what our families and societies have taught us. If we start to break outside of that, we often have this unconscious fear, sometimes very conscious, that somebody close to us is going to reject us, somebody close to us is going to shame us, somebody close to us is going to cast us out. And I see this trajectory with a lot of people who start doing professional development work and who start growing a business and who start pushing the boundaries of success.
mm,
And that first time that they break through the boundaries, and I remember this, what it was for myself as well, that first time that you break through that like layer of like, oh my God, this is way more than I ever thought was
mm,
possible. And you overcome that fear of like, oh, actually, people aren't seeing me differently. Or if they are seeing me differently, actually, I can handle it. It's okay. Like I've got skills to handle it. Then it compounds and then it snowballs. And it's like, well, actually, I can handle that. So if I was afraid of success only for that reason, there's nothing left for me to be afraid of in terms of success. So the family one is one of them. The money one is a big one as well. Like how much money you're allowed to have, how much money we feel safe having. Often, so many of us have been quote unquote trained to be more comfortable in the struggle with money than having more than enough money. We're comfortable, as uncomfortable as it is, in the state of struggle every month. Like, am I going to have enough? Like, pushing it to the edge. And we always get to the end of the month and we seem to have the same amount of like money left over or the same amount of debt at the end of the month, right? And we get comfortable in that. And as uncomfortable as it is, it's more comfortable than pushing out and like starting to experience more and what that represents to us. Like, what if I drive that really nice car? What if people judge me? What if I can't relate to my friends anymore when they bitch and moan about how they have no money anymore, right? What if I can't be part of those conversations? And so it's kind of like another flavor of that potential social rejection, but with more specifics around like money. Those would be two that I see a lot. And then another one is, and this is, I think, even more prevalent now that we have social media and the potential of going viral and like having a big audience is so much easier than it once was, right? Fame was once really hard to achieve. Now, if you have a good reel strategy, a good TikTok strategy, you could have it overnight. And we are seeing that play out in real time where we're watching people go viral. We are watching the haters pile on. We are watching the negative, fallback of what it means to be famous. And a lot of us are scared of that. And rightly so. That is something that can absolutely damage you and can be so so challenging for you, and something that we really have to consider if we actually want. Do you want fame? Is
Mm.
that actually something that you genuinely want? Because that will genuinely change your life forever. And I know for myself, that's been a journey that I've been on, is like, actually, I do have that fear of being called out, or, but I can neutralize that fear. And at the same time, I can say, actually, I don't want to be really famous. I don't want to have hundreds of thousands of followers. I don't want to be, known all over the world. I actually don't want any of that. I want to make an impact with this particular group of people, and that's what I want. And I think that is part of the like awesome thing about growth, is that as you learn to navigate those things that you're fearful of, on the other side of it, you get to choose, even if I've neutralized this fear, do I still want that thing?
Mm.
And that's a really important part of it, right? Because I know you know this too, is like there has been this chase for money in the online coaching industry and the online business industry, right? This chase, 5K months, 10K months, 50K months, 100K months, like whatever it is. And a lot of people don't stop to think if they actually want that. And they're just chasing it for the sake of it because, of what it could potentially mean for them. And this is, I think, a really cool thing, is that you can actually choose, you can pick and choose the pieces of success that you want. And when the success is designed the way that you actually want it to be, then a lot of the fear goes away because we don't have a need for it anymore, because we actually want that more than we want to avoid the fear of it.
Mm. I remember I had a client last year and she wanted her next big months to be 25K months.
Mhm.
And she was chasing it, chasing. And I said to her, if I came to your house tomorrow with a briefcase of $25,000 and I dropped it to you, what would you do? And I remember being on the call and she said, oh, I'd be really, really excited. And I said, okay, just let that settle. And then in that month for the $25,000, knowing it's going to come again, what would you do with it? She goes, oh, well, I'd pay my bills and I'd go to a nice dinner and maybe buy some new activewear. I said, okay, so maybe that's a couple thousand. What
Yeah.
else?
Yeah.
And she just said, and she was stuck. She said, I don't know, put some money in my savings. Okay, another couple thousand. What
Yeah.
else? We're up to
Mhm.
about 5K here. You've got $20,000 left. And I really challenged her and I said, what else? What's the next thing? What do you
Mm.
want? And it was really, really hard for her to articulate why she was chasing this amount of money.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is because, yes, she had learned that that was kind of like an amount in the industry or around coaches she knew that had put on the pedestal in this fantasy land that hadn't been neutralized to
Mhm.
chase for. And she said, I actually don't even need that much amount of money. And I don't
Yeah.
even think I want that. And it's crazy. Is I love what you said, is whether it's money or anything else, do you actually want that? Why
Yeah.
do you actually want that? What are you chasing for? If there is so much, and I know that you've seen it as well about um, how to go viral with Reels or TikTok or whatever. Why do you want that?
Why?
Why do
Yeah.
you want that Reel to get 1 million views? Why do you want that TikTok to go super viral? What is the reason? And it doesn't mean, and for everyone listening, it doesn't mean not to aim for that or not to have a goal. I think it's more about, why do you want that? What is the reasoning? And I loved everything that you pointed out, from the belonging to the certain amount of money. I know that I have definitely struggled myself with when I got more successful in business. And I did start to make more so than my friends who were working 9 to 5s, grinding a monthly
Mhm.
paycheck. That was
Mhm.
really, really hard for me. It was
Mhm.
really, really confronting to me. And I spent a long time dimming myself and dimming my light, because in my mind was saying, well, why do you get to work at home and love what you do and make
Yeah.
more than your friends who maybe are a lawyer and a sit at an office job and leave the office at 12 a.m.? Why do
Yeah.
you get to have that?
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
it's funny because then I found myself getting into these cycles of dimming my light and being really scared of that and not attracting that anymore. And
Mhm.
so for people listening that that are resonating and they have a true why to why they want something,
Mhm.
but they're unsure how to get past, okay, my family are going to judge me or ask me for money, or my friends are going to expect me to pay for every dinner, or I want to be famous, I want to be seen as famous. How do we get, what's the first step in really uncovering that unconscious fear?
So the questions that I ask clients go in this pattern. We go, what is it that you're afraid is going to happen? And like asking the question, what else? 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 Until you exhaust that and it gets everything out from that subconscious of like, oh my gosh, these are all the things that I think are going to potentially happen. And then going through each of them one by one and being able to look at each of them and go, well, actually, what is the likelihood that that would happen?
Mm,
How likely is it that that would actually happen? And a lot of them are like, oh, actually, it's not that likely. For example, like, they're afraid that their friend is going to judge them. And it's like, well, how do you actually think that they would respond? And then like, oh, actually, they wouldn't respond that way. They would totally be supportive or whatever it is, right? So you actually look at it very logically. And for some of them, they are going to go, well, actually, I think that is very likely. Maybe my friends are going to expect that I'm going to pay for every dinner. Okay, well, if that happened, how would you actually handle that? What would you say? What would you do? And like preparing clients ahead of time with the skills to navigate those conversations, to navigate placing those boundaries, to navigate communicating needs, um, any of those things that they're afraid of, addressing them ahead of time and equipping the client with the skills so that they actually know that they can handle it. Because then we can logically go into it and go, okay, I actually know that if this happened, here is what I would do. And sometimes you actually have to exercise those skills, and it's awesome because you're like, well, I've just done it. And then the other side of it is the emotional choice. And it's kind of like, well, look, you have this option right now. You are standing at, you know, this point right here. You could choose to continue going down the same pathway. And yes, you would get to avoid potentially all of those things that you're afraid of happening. What's going to be the outcome of that? Like, what are you going to continue experiencing? And are you okay with that? And sometimes the answer is yes. And it's like, okay, great. Well, that's your answer. But when the answer is no, it's like, well, okay, well, are you prepared then to face all of those potential fears in pursuit of something else? And if that thing is that meaningful to you, then you've not only just neutralized the motivation to stay the same, but you've also helped build the motivation to change. And when you balance those two things out, it is so much easier to start taking action because when that little voice pops up and it's like, oh, but what about this? Or what if this happens? It's like, well, yes, okay, cool. I know how to handle that. And I'm going to take this step anyway because it is personally meaningful to me. And I find addressing it with clients in that way, where we're actually like breaking it down. And it's like, we've dealt with the logical part, we've dealt with the emotional part. Now actually go and do it. And the beautiful thing is that once they do it and they experience those experiences, they realize that they can handle it. And when you realize that you can handle something that you were so afraid of, like what does it do for you and your feeling of like self-efficacy? You're like, well, I can fucking handle anything, right? Like, give it to me. And that then compounds over time. And that's where I think we can see people having a lot of growth in a very like short space of time, but it's like been built for like months or years before that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big, I love that you said that, and it's building that self trust. It's this
Mhm.
compound effect. And I think that a lot of people look at building self trust and the resilience piece is like you need to take this big leap all of a sudden overnight one day, when in fact, it's all these small little compounding effects that you need to take. You need to start somewhere. You need to ask yourself these questions. And I love that kind of framework that you go through on those questions, and I think that more people need to get better at self reflection. What are your thoughts on self reflection?
Oh, I mean, it's the cornerstone of my life at this point.
Yeah.
But I think it is such a skill. Like self-reflection requires motivation to first be really honest with yourself. And then it requires self-awareness and being able to look at ourselves objectively. And that's really hard to do. And I think because of those two blocks, most people don't do it enough, you know? But self reflection is why I say I don't need a coach all of the time, and neither does anybody else. If you have a really solid self-reflection process and self-accountability process, and you have these skills to be really honest with yourself about what's going on and everything that is going on within you, you actually don't need to be reliant on a coach. And that's something that I will like hound until, the cows come home, because we're taught as coaches, you have to, you know, your audience needs to feel like they need you, and like they need to feel like they always need to buy from you. And I call bullshit on that. Like the whole point of coaching is that we work ourselves out of a job. And so like self-reflection is absolutely key to being able to work ourselves out of a job, to be able to work our coaches out of a job, I should say. um I love it. It's part of my everyday practice. I journal all the time. It's and even then it's a moment by moment self-awareness that's so required as well. It's like actually moment by moment in your life, can you be aware of what you're thinking, what you're feeling, how you're choosing to behave, your impulses, your urges, all of those things.
Yeah, the moment by moment, and really getting in tune with what am I thinking? How am I behaving? I think,
Mm.
you know, setting having more emphasis on being able to just, even if it's not journaling and sitting down, but it's like whilst you're making lunch, think about how are you feeling? How are you thinking? How was your interaction with your partner this morning? These small
Mhm.
things, I think it's needed in every day. And I'm exactly like you. It's the forefront of everything I do. So I love that you emphasize that. I want to switch gears a little
Mhm.
bit. Yesterday, and I'm going to get it up just for some context for all of the listeners. I requoted a thread,
Mhm.
and I'm going to read the original thread. I'm going to read my response, and then I
Mhm.
would love to speak about it to do with the coaching industry and the standards.
Mhm.
So, for all of the listeners, the original thread was: my life coach friends, it's okay for you to recommend a client also see a therapist. Stop trying to poke at traumas and wounds you don't know how to hold space for. You don't have to prove yourself. That's like a car mechanic being asked to engineer a highway. I understand your intention. I've been there, trust me, but refer out what you need to. I responded to the thread first and I said, I actively and willingly will say this is not in my expertise. Here's other safe spaces you can look at to get supported. And then I quoted it and I said, this is a bit more of a spicier response from me. I was just thinking about this again. I'm honestly sick to death of seeing 21-year-olds coaching on neuroscience and shadow work. Your prefrontal cortex hasn't even been developed. I know you mean well, but please stop. And you responded, literally sick of anyone teaching about this if they don't have the appropriate qualifications.
Mhm.
It's true. I feel there is the standard for the coaching industry has definitely dropped.
Mhm.
I fully stand behind what I said. I don't think a 21-year-old has any place to speak about the things that you have also gone and learned and studied,
Mhm.
even for myself,
Mm.
and I think that it's shocking.
Yeah.
I feel that the younger generation actually don't understand the impact it can make, especially if they do have a following. There's a big, movement of aesthetic lifestyle, aesthetic
Mhm.
being. And it's like, oh, I like the way she lives her life. I like the way she's created her Instagram or her TikTok. I'm going to hire her instead. And she's also a lot cheaper and she speaks about mindset. So I'm going to hire her or him, whoever.
Mm.
What are your thoughts on this?
Okay. How long have you got?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
I mean, we could start in so many different places. I'm going to try to not be on my soapbox about this. I think I want to just preface this and say I love coaching, and coaching changed my life entirely by being coached and becoming a coach, and I believe in coaching so deeply. And I think what you're speaking about here is we're seeing a lot more of these conversations pop up. And I've kind of been like gleefully enjoying it because I've been saying this for years,
Mhm.
and people were like, just doing whatever the frick they wanted for so many years in their coaching sessions. And I actually don't think this is necessarily isolated to 21-year-olds.
Yeah.
I actually think that a lot of the reason that people are feeling like they can do this is because we have big names in industry that are
Yeah.
known worldwide who are modeling this as well. There are huge names, not to name them, but they don't have degrees in psychology. They don't have appropriate training in how to work with trauma, and yet they do anyway, and they do it very publicly. And then they sell their courses and they make out like other people can do it too. So we have this whole culture that has been built around assuming that internal change is a lot more simplistic than it actually is. We have a lot of people believing that things like NLP are evidence-based when in fact they are absolutely not. And we have a whole lot of people who have come into an industry drawn in by the potential money and not enough of a drive for the potential impact, with the potential devastation that can be caused if you fuck up a client session,
Yeah.
right? We don't have enough people who are trained effectively, and the standards that are current are not good enough because they are not based on science. Like, we have research for a reason. We have degrees and training, and for a psychologist to work with trauma, they need to have studied for a minimum of 6 years, done 1,500 hours to get their registration, plus had additional training on how to work with trauma. And we have people who are showing up saying, oh, I run like a trauma-informed life coaching certificate. And I'm like, come on, like,
Yeah.
no, like, please. Like, my stance is that no coach should be working with trauma. I don't care if you tell me that you're trauma-informed. It is not our place. We refer 100% of the time. But I also think what we're experiencing right now, as painful as it is to see people going through these experiences of like, this coach burned me and this coach
Yeah.
traumatized me, and as horrible as that is, it was always going to happen because there are no standards in place. And because of this, we now have this groundswell movement of people caring a lot more about choosing coaches who are well trained, who are well versed. And yes, that's not everybody just yet, but the market is deciding. And when the market decides, that's where the money will go. And so we're going to start seeing way more people. Like, I've been running a coaching certification for the last couple of years now, and the interest in that this year has been phenomenal in comparison to previous years. People's motivation to train has been brought on by this external fear, this fear of the external, of being called out. And it's not ideal, but it's motivation. And I think that's where the exciting conversations are going to really start to happen, is like, without the external standard, what standard do we want to hold as practitioners? And what training is required for us to do that?
110%. And I think you're right. There's been so many people who have been burned by coaches and
Mm.
have these expectations of how something's going to be. And it really, it really upsets me because in saying this, I do believe there are a lot of people who come out and want to be a coach that don't have the experience. I do believe there are good intentions
I
to
definitely
begin
think
with.
so.
110%. So I just wanted to say that as well, as I do believe there are good intentions behind that, and I totally understand it. But having a vested interest in personal development books and podcasts isn't enough. And it's annoying me more and more. I think it's something I definitely have to work on neutralizing, because I've been seeing it a lot over this, especially, I don't know what it is, the past 6 to 12 months. I'm seeing a lot, especially the younger generation, creating these, canvas slides and all of this. And it's just not enough, and it's not good enough. And I haven't even responded to everyone on that thread that I posted, but another comment I got, it's mostly positive, but someone goes, why can't they teach shadow work? It's a spiritual practice.
Mm.
And it can be, but there's also different elements to it.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
It's about the psyche. And
Mm-hmm.
there are 18-year-olds trying to teach shadow work.
Yeah.
You don't know about the psyche. Yours
No.
isn't even developed. This is the thing. This is what annoys me. And I don't think it's like, yes, you may mean well and you may think, okay,
Mm.
let's sit and journal and think about what are these fears that I have, but it's also not enough. And this isn't to put anyone down. This isn't to take away, if you're listening and maybe this is a bit triggering and you're thinking, oh, hang on, I'm a bit younger and I'm doing this as well. I think this is, and I guess you would agree to, Carl, is like, how can you better yourself to be in that position? Not just for yourself, whether it's the education, the training, whatever it may be, but also for the people that you are taking on board. And, when I started my business, and I have done the training and everything. I would get on sales calls when I used to do a lot of sales calls back then. Straight away, I would know within the first 5 minutes, do you
Mm,
need me, a coach, or do you
mm,
need a therapist?
mm,
And I think people are so afraid, even this day and age, to think it's the money. I don't want
mm.
to say no to this client because of the potential money. And for me, it's just not worth it for myself to bring because I can't handle that. I'm not in a space, not qualified to handle that. But also, that person, they deserve to have
Mm.
the proper qualified person that can hold the space and give them the tools that they need.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this comes back to, do you know the Dunning-Kruger effect?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's just that, right? Like
Yeah, it
people who just
is.
they don't know enough, they think that they know more than they actually.
Yeah.
And like you say, I don't think that's necessarily badly intentioned. But I think this is why we do have to be collectively careful of the messaging that we put out into the space, because creating an expectation like you can make, 10K in your first month as a coach, it means that people are going to be more likely to say yes to absolutely every potential client that comes their way, because they're like, well, that's how I'm going to do it. And I've got such scarcity around clients right now because I haven't actually put the time in to learn how to market to bigger audiences and things like that. These things take time.
Mm,
You don't see psychologists walking out of university and having full books overnight unless they're going to a practice where that's already, in place for them. And they've spent 6, 8, 10 years of study preparing themselves for it. So I think you're absolutely spot on. I don't think that it is badly intentioned. I just think that there is not enough education out there and too much motivation for the money, which
mm.
needs to be counterbalanced with the motivation for the impact and, you know, doing right by our clients.
Why do you think the industry has been so swept up in the past 12 to 24 months? I've been vocal about this on threads
Mm,
of chasing this goal. And I think for a period of time, to call myself out, I was in this. I was swept away that, oh, I must make X amount and I must
mm,
reach that, or else it means that I'm not successful or I'm not a good coach or I'm not worthy of this industry. Why do you think? I think we're slowly coming out of it. I do believe we're slowly coming out because it's also not very authentic. I believe in sharing money wins, but there's different degrees that have been shown. But why do you think there has been such a change into this money hungry? And I say this as someone who loves money, but
mm.
that's the only goalpost in this
Be-
industry.
because we're human.
Mm,
Because we have been raised in a capitalistic society
mm,
that associates money with success. And the more money we have, the more worthy we feel as a person. We attach everything to, when I have more money, I will have this life, I will feel this thing. And that's why it all comes from lack. And
mm.
the flip side of it is that we've had a lot of people make a lot of money and then turn around and go, oh, well, that didn't solve my problems.
Yep, I
And
I
they feel
resonate with that. I
same.
resonate with that 110%. I remember I think the most grateful, and I've switched this over the past few years, but I was ecstatic. I cried when I made my first $10,000 month, and then it started to build. And when I hit $25,000 in early on, I was like, oh, that's okay. Let's get more. And
Mm,
I've really been having these conversations lately because I'm like, that is crazy because we get so desensitized. That is absolutely crazy. And
yeah.
you're right, we are human. We're in this society where it's like, if I have X amount that is going to make me happy, someone's listening right now, whether they have their business, whether they're in a career,
Mm.
and they're in that, they're like, the goal is more and more and more bonuses, more clients. What would you say to them if they feel, number one, you're blocking yourself energetically from the flow of money, but number two, it doesn't feel good to be in that chase? Where would we even start to dismantle that?
Oh my God, it's going to be different for every single person.
Mm,
Um, I think this is the place that I always start with clients is a recentering around desires and having a
mm,
really honest conversation about what do you actually want and why do you want it. So one of the first things I have clients do is I have them map out like what would success look like for you for the next year, and that immediately shows me where they are feeling like money is going to be a solution or an audience number is going to be a solution. And when we dig into the conversations around why do you want each of those things, it starts to come to light as where like their conditioning is and what they assume is going to solve their problems. And that then becomes the entry point to have the conversation around, well, if that's not what you want for all of those wrong reasons, then what might you actually want in its place?
mm,
And creating that and learning to be in that and be present in that and actually enjoy that. Because, like you say, you reach the $25,000 months and you're like, okay, great. Well, what's next? We get
yeah.
desensitized to it. It's like, well, actually, but $25,000, if your expenses are not very high in your business, which
Mm,
they really don't need to be in a
yeah.
coaching business, that is a lot of money. That is life-changing money. And that is far above the amount that we actually need to be like surviving and happy, right? I
Mm,
think in Australia, it came out recently that it's about $180,000 is kind
mm,
of what they say is like, that's what happiness, the threshold is.
mm,
That's a lot of money
mm,
for a lot of people to have. But if you're making 25K a month, you're far exceeding that, like, so it's being able to draw it back. And this takes a lot for coaches to do this, I think, because as coaches, sometimes our ego and our desire for our clients' results is all wrapped up in what we then feel worthy of ourselves. So if we're challenging our clients to go, actually, do you want those shiny things? We have to be willing for them to give up those things as well.
mm.
And we have to be willing to be on that conversation.
Yeah. What is your version of success, Carly?
My version of success is the exact life I have right now.
I love that.
It's lots of time and space to travel.
Mm,
I travel a lot. That's really important to me. I thought that I would get that out of my system, quote unquote, but I never have. It's part of what I love.
mm,
It's been able to be in a beautiful environment day by day and live in an amazing, amazing place. It's been able to have the money to say yes to the things that I want to say yes to with lots of friends. And I spend a lot of my time and money traveling with friends. And then in my business, it's having the clients that I'm getting to impact in the ways that are most meaningful to me. And that it's an evolution. I think that always changes for us as well. Like as we grow, the impact that we want to make changes too. It's exactly what I have right now. And I
that's
don't
beautiful.
need to have a lot more.
Mm,
And I think this is a really cool place to get to is like
yeah.
financially, I don't need to have a lot more than this.
Yep.
And anything else that I happen to create is because I have made a contribution to somebody else's life in a way that they have financially compensated me for it. And that's just the reflection of that.
And that's the thing. I had this conversation last night actually, and it's all about you want more money, if that's the goal, impact more people,
Mm,
create more of impact, serve. I think
mm,
that when you're just chasing the next dollar amount and it feels really, really hard, it's because you're not making enough impact. And this may hurt some people's egos,
mhm,
but make more impact. Allow people to have space with you where they grow and where they evolve. And I like what you said about your clients too, is I was reflecting earlier this year on the evolution of my clients, and I'm in the same space as you. I like look at my life and I'm like, this is it. This is
mm,
success to me, and everything extra is an overflow of what
mm.
I'm currently experiencing. Where's the next place you're traveling to?
Next place I'm going to is back to Melbourne on the way to Japan for a friend's wedding.
Nice, nice. How long are you going to Japan for? I'm going the start of next year, actually.
Oh, me too. We've
Yeah.
actually just got the second Japan trip.
Oh, nice.
Um,
Nice.
we've got 2 weeks in April, and then we'll probably go for about 2 weeks again in January.
Yeah. Have you been to Japan before?
I have, but about 9 years ago, I think it was.
Yeah.
Have
Oh
you?
my God. No, I'm excited. Me and my partner are going to go snowboarding.
Love it. So good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Carly. This has been such an incredible, incredible episode. And when I get to the end of the episode, I have like a list of different questions and I choose one to ask
Ooh,
each guest. And
great.
I was just thinking, what would I like to ask you in here? So, um, okay. If you could distill your life's philosophy or a piece of advice into a single sentence, what would it be?
It's a quote from Henry David Thoreau, and it was on a card that I got for my birthday when I think I was 19 years old. And it says, "Go confidently in the direction of your dreams, live the life you have imagined."
Oh, love that. Yes, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Where can everyone find you, connect with you, learn from you? It's the
Yeah,
best place.
good question. So we are actually in the process of splitting up my Instagrams, which is a really exciting process. So I'm
Mm,
assuming by the time this goes live, that will already be happening. So you can find me on one of three Instagrams.
mhm.
It's Carly, the Fulfillionaires, or the Midas Academy.
Okay, amazing, amazing. And anything else you want to share with people before we end this episode?
Oh, great question. Um, I think based on what we've been speaking about today, if you are the kind of person who knows that you're not just here for the money, explore that. Like if you
Mm,
have this sense that the money is really not going to fulfill you, start to play with what will before the chasing money becomes a problem. Because once
mm.
you are in that place where you've built a really big business that is churning through lots of clients and making lots of money, if you've built something that is not fulfillment based for you, it's going to be so much harder to break it down and build it back up again than it is for you to start building your business and growing your business fulfillment first now.
Love that. That was great to end the episode. I think that's going to help a lot of people. Thank you so much, Carly. I really appreciate your time. I love this episode, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, Jess. Thanks so much for having me.